Using stats and data as a guiding light for video game balancing is valid, as it typically highlights what items are most in need of attention and additional readjustments. However, one of the problems with relying mostly on stats and data is that it doesn't always show the true reasons as to why or how an issue first emerges, and in some cases, why the issue accelerates. Those reasons must be unearthed by evaluating other sources, like combing through community feedback, and also by looking at the core fundamentals of the game. And if the reasons that are found after evaluating everything are not accurate to the reality of what's happening, then the subsequent solutions that will be created to try and resolve the issue will be messy, haphazard, and flimsy at best. For example, data can show that a certain killer or map has a well above or below average kill rate, but the reasons as to why or how are not readily available in the data itself. The nurse is a perfect example of correctly identifying the why and how, even though the data doesn't tell the full story. She is a killer that has been understood as needing no additional buffs or upgrades, while having one of the lowest kill rates in the game. This is because Nurse is the biggest outlier when it comes to how a standard DBD killer functions, as she takes the most amount of precision and skill to be successful in a match. When you play her well, you win a lot. When you play her bad, the results speak for themselves. Now, a counterexample to this is Object of Obsession. Years ago, the devs cited data showing object users having low escape rates, so they didn't see the need to adjust the perk, even though there was an understanding amongst the most dedicated players that it was problematic to say the least. But after some time, this perk did eventually receive a healthy overhaul. These inverse scenarios exemplify how data doesn't tell the full story and why more in-depth investigating and comprehension of the basic fundamentals of the game is necessary before choosing to either enact change or choosing to do nothing. Now enter the issue of tunneling. The devs have cited data that shows tunneling as one of the major reasons players choose to uninstall the game. It's also been a fairly common complaint over the years amongst many survivors, with it producing a variety of thoughts and opinions on how it can be addressed and whether it should be in the first place. It's certainly not an easy issue to fix, but what probably does not help things either is that everyone has a slightly different set of ideas and experiences to describe what tunneling is, when it feels oppressive as a survivor, and how it could be fixed. As a survivor main myself, I've had a lot of mixed feelings about tunneling over the years, but the main issue for me personally is not necessarily tunneling itself, but specifically when tunneling makes me feel utterly helpless. Whether it's watching a teammate get hard tunneled while I have no tools available to help them, or if I'm the one being hard tunneled against one of the strongest killers in the game with the ability to end chases very quickly, feeling helpless is just never fun in a match. If I have the tools and resources available in a match to at least give an honest effort in a hard tunneling situation, I'm all good. And no, this does not mean having 50 pallets to use, just a simple map that allows for some sort of counterplay for everybody. The good news is that player agency is at the forefront of what the devs want to preserve, which is awesome. So when the devs receive data about why players may be uninstalling, and also see actual feedback to support that data, it is a completely natural and justifiable reaction for them to use this information as a reason to try and reduce tunneling, as ultimately they do want players to continue playing their game after all. However, the onus is on the devs to investigate the issue of tunneling, identify the correct whys and hows for it happening, and then hopefully find a reasonable resolution. Now, between the 9.2 PTB and the 9.3 PTB, a variety of different changes have been put forward as the solution to decrease tunneling. Some changes were retracted between PTBs, while other changes were simply reintroduced with small adjustments. And while no one can disagree that the changes they've presented show an attempt to diminish tunneling, the approach to resolving this issue feels like the strangest and frankly the laziest way to try and resolve it. The proposed antidote for tunneling does nothing but widen the gap between the two endpoints in DBD's rough power structure, the weakest killers and solo queue survivors on one side and the strongest killers and coordinated groups on the other. Instead of rooting out the problems that allow tunneling to thrive, the proposed changes will only lessen the power of the weakest killers while barely impacting the strongest ones. And then as for survivors, solo queue teammates have no new incentives or tools to work together to help their team, while actual coordinated groups can potentially wield the unhook buffs as a weapon against most killers. There are a number of adjustments and quality of life boosts, both small and large, that should be initiated before even thinking about implementing the proposed anti-tunnel changes. To name a few examples of what can be done, First and foremost, solo queue perk and item visibility. One of the main things needed for solo queue survivors is the ability to see the perks and items of your teammates. While never quite at the same level as a coordinated group, this would allow for more coordination, like if someone has a healing build or shoulder the burden, let them go for a save on a person being tunneled. Weaker killers having some sort of boost to help level the playing field, at least somewhat. The weakest killers need some sort of buff to slow down gen progression, and specifically something that rewards not hard tunneling the same survivor. Nerfing some of the strongest killers to reduce the power imbalance. I feel like this one's obvious, but I don't think there's any reason why killers like Nurse, Blight, and even Ghoul, for example, can be this strong, but then there's other killers that are nowhere near as good as them. Problematic perk combos that limit a survivor's ability to do much in a chase, like the super fast vault build and pallet destruction builds, especially on certain killers that benefit even more from them. If you get tunneled by a killer that has a build like this, it quickly cuts off options in a chase, especially if you're already injured after being unhooked and there isn't much that really can be done except going down at a pallet and hoping you get pallet saved. Problematic perks that incentivize tunneling. Less perks like Deadman Switch and Deliverance, and more perks like Make Your Choice and Come and Get Me, Rick's perk if you don't know. And make these perks stronger, or just more useful overall. And another obvious change, maps. The general balance structure of maps has never been the greatest, and the recent pallet density update has disrupted this even more. There's never going to be a perfect balance for every map, but the goal should be to reduce the severity and how strong or weak they can be. These redesigns and improvements should be a main part of the solution for reducing tunneling, but it's clear that the reasons as to why and how tunneling occurs have simply not been accurately detected by the devs. The fact that several long-standing issues are not even being directly addressed before implementing these newly proposed anti-tunneling measures is absurd. Is it shocking? Not really, given the history and pattern of how they choose to do their balancing, but time constraints are also probably a factor, I have to imagine. But the worst part about all of this is that the proposed anti-tunneling measures will not minimize the form of tunneling that most critically needs to be addressed. The form of tunneling that truly degrades the survivor experience, where endurance and decisive strike only buy mere moments of protection, turning a game of Survivor into a game of cannon fodder. Tunneling is most oppressive when playing against the killers with the strongest powers. I'm thinking of mostly the high mobility ones, of course. There's a huge difference between being tunneled by an M1 killer like Trapper and a high mobility killer like Blight. So why are these anti-tunneling measures being universally implemented for every match and every killer? Where's the understanding for the power imbalance between killers and recognizing the problems with the Blight hard tunneling at 5 gens and a Trapper tunneling at 2 gens? The devs are at least somewhat aware of this power imbalance, as the 9.2 PTB patch notes was the first time we've ever seen the devs acknowledge the power disparity between killers. This acknowledgement was a ginormous step in the right direction for understanding the imbalance that has existed between killers for years, but this 9.3 PTB acts like that was never mentioned. And while some data regarding tunneling was shared to help partially explain the approach to a lot of these changes in the first place, I personally found the data that was shared to be mostly surface level. Where is the data on which killers have the highest and lowest amount of tunneling? All ranks, all killers, all maps, all MMRs. Just make a quick chart showing it for everybody. This feels like one of the most crucial data points and obvious ones to look at, and it's completely missing from the discussion, while these massive changes are meanwhile being tested and possibly fully implemented into the game. Ideally, this kind of data could at least shed some light on the extremes of when and where tunneling happens. I have my own theories on what this data would show, but I shouldn't have to theorize about it when this data could just be shown to everyone. All of this to say, if these anti-tunneling measures from the 9.3 PTB have to be implemented, why not try them out only for the S-tier killers? Nurse, Blight, Ghoul. That's the ones I'm thinking of at least. This is probably the best way to test how effective these changes would even be at halting the most oppressive tunneling in the game, which occurs when killers sweat their asses off to guarantee a 4K as quick as possible. These 3 killers are well known for not only their high mobility, but also the ability to end chases within seconds of one starting. These are the killers that have the easiest time canceling out any unhook buffs like endurance and decisive strike. Then after enough time has passed, the data can be analyzed to see how much of an impact the anti-tunneling measures had, and then decisions can be made about if any adjustments are needed or if it's worth expanding it to be universal in-game. I see no reason as to why the anti-tunneling tunneling solution cannot be constructed by fixing smaller things that eliminate frustrating gameplay elements and saving the boosted unhook bus for only the cream of the crop and the killer power structure. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.